Stavanger Filmmakers. Sånn, ja.
You just got back from the Romford Film Festival, right?
Yes, I was promoted this year, so I was hosting interviews with the filmmakers. So they would have a screening, and then we do like a Q&A panel with them afterwards to give them an opportunity to speak about their film. It was great. I met so many different people. I learned so much. They're very educational, and I saw so many films.
And what's it like judging films? What was your role as you were a judge, right? Not just a host, or?
I was a judge, yeah. So I get sent the films before the festival opens, obviously, on Film Freeway, and I get sent about 80 films, which I try to watch. It's quite a lot of content, but and then I have to give them all a mark out of 10, but on about 10 different categories. So like cinematography, performances, writing, direction, timing, structure. So I have to it's quite complicated. You're grading it, score, that's another one. You're grading it on lots of different facets. And then the machine generates an overall score. And you can also press a little button to flag it if you think it's worthy of an award. And there's a team of people, so it's not just one person's opinion, because that would be strange. So they take, I guess, the average of all the judges' opinions into consideration. It was great. I'm very lucky.
Did you see many of your picks show up in the final ballots?
Yes. I think usually there's a consensus about which films are brilliant. It's the easiest ones to judge. The ones that are brilliant are obvious, and the ones that are terrible are obvious. The difficulty is the films that are kind of a 5 or a 6 out of 10, like that kind of middle of the road. That's harder to judge, because you think, is it a 5 or a 6? Is it 6.5? I don't know. Like, that's the hardest things. The ones that are great are obvious. Yeah.
And what do you, as an actor, what do you get out of the festivals? Do you go there for networking? Do you know lots of the people who are there? Is it similar faces each year?
Yeah, it's excellent networking, and it's also just very educational. Like, I mean, I sat through hours and hours of films, both beforehand and then during the festival. And it's very educational. It's educational watching a good film. It's also educational watching a bad film, because you learn when you see something and think, right, well, I'll never do that. That didn't work. So you're always learning. Even when it's bad, I'm learning. And you get to listen to the Q&As, and there were workshops with clever people talking. So I learned so much. I know. So I can talk about this if you want. This is the work
that was my next question. Please tell me about your equity work.
And then I've also got, I've put together, look how many notes I've written. I've written notes of like stuff to share with you. But okay, when I joined Equity like 8 years ago or whenever it was, so Equity's the UK union for actors and performers, and well, we call it professionals in the performing arts, because it's also stage directors and choreographers and stunt people and dancers and singers, and basically anyone that works in a kind of performing capacity. Or actually, a lot of the backstage people are also eligible for Equity, as are SAs and theatre designers and just anyone kind of in performance. So the UK Equity's definition of a low budget film when I joined was a film with a budget of less than £3 million.
I think we qualify, yeah.
But I think what I found when I joined was that I think that definition might have been fine 20 years ago, maybe, because I think it used to be the case that it was only big studios that were able to make films, and they had mega budgets. But nowadays, I think there's been a sort of democratization of filmmaking over the last 10 years or so, because camera equipment now is affordable. We've all gotten into the habit of kind of carrying a camera about with us in our pocket. and it's kind of afforded ordinary people the chance to make films. But the reality then, I think, is that the average person now is making a film with nowhere near £3 million, not even in the same ballpark. Like, I think Derelict, which you mentioned in Wales, had a budget of 30,000. Jonathan's previous film, which I was involved in before that, had a budget of 5,000. So my argument to Equity was that it's unfair to expect a production with 30,000 to be held to the same legal standards as somebody with 3 million or 5 million or whatever it is. And one of the things that was stopping filmmakers from using equity agreements was that they couldn't meet the sort of criteria that you need to meet in terms of the amount of money that they were expected to pay performers, like the weekly rate that you're on, and also a lot of the kind of the insurance premiums and just the amount of money. And I said to the people at Equity that I think we need to move with the times, and we need to have a new agreement, which we can't at Equity, I think, say to filmmakers, oh, that's no good, come back when you've got 3 million, because that was kind of the mindset. And I think we have to meet people where they're at, and we have to provide some sort of contract or agreement that people can use when they're at the low budget stage of 30,000. So that's and I came up against quite a lot of resistance at Equity when I first broached the idea. And there's a mindset usually amongst the older members, because they're from a different generation, that say that, well, if you haven't got the budget to be paying people properly, you shouldn't be making the film. And I think I have said to people that I think that's not good enough as a mindset. And actually, we do have to, if we don't support filmmakers when they have 5,000, then they'll never make it to 3 million. And actually, the people with millions probably don't really need much help from Equity. It's the people at the bottom who kind of need the help. So I came up with this. So this allows you to pay your performers national minimum wage, which enables you to get your film made on an Equity agreement in the UK. And what's great about it is that although it allows you to pay national minimum wage, it still has all the other stuff, because an Equity agreement is not just about money, it's also about working conditions and health and safety on set, which is something that I think in the low budget world is often kind of maybe we could be a bit better with health and safety sometimes. Sometimes I've seen some shocking, people hanging off scaffolding that was hastily built 10 minutes ago, and people down in basements that are only half lit, and everyone kind of making do because this is the only location we could find, and blah, blah, blah. So it's got the kind of, again, you can't, I don't know whether you can see all this, but like welfare and dignity at work, and special stipulations around nudity and this kind of thing. Also insurance, that even if you're on a low budget thing, your actors still need to be insured. Meal allowances, things to do with there should be proper rehearsal time. If you're doing any kind of stunts, that needs to be worked out. You can't be sort of thrown into it with a sort of, oh, just make it work, So it was my attempt at kind of trying to bring a little bit of structure to the low budget world, which can be a bit sort of cowboys and crazy Wild West. So that was kind of my attempt to introduce a little bit of regulation. And it's sort of equivalent. We have a fringe theatre agreement in the UK, which does the same thing for theatres, because we acknowledge and we understand that like someone doing a play in a room above a pub with an audience of 12 people can't be held to the same standards as the National Theatre. So we have a different agreement. And so it's the same kind of thing. It's like, I call it the screen equivalent of the Fringe Theatre Agreement when I'm trying to explain it to people. So I don't know what your union is like in your country, or whether you have anything similar, or whether this is useful.
I think it's useful to know the kind of guidelines that you use, and if I want to ask people here about it as well. But as I understand it, you would then use this document and say, like, I'm not comfortable with the length of time I've had to perform this stunt as per equity guidelines. The recommended time is 2 weeks or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it gives you it gives the performer a leg to stand on if you're being asked to do something crazy. Also, there are rules about the amount of hours between being on set. So if you don't wrap until 11 p.m., they can't call you back at 7 a.m. the next day. There has to be you have to have enough time to sleep, and rather than it just being you on your own saying, this is not good enough, you can sort of say, well, actually, it breaches equity's guidelines on the subject. And I think it can be useful when you're dealing with producers to have a kind of bit of legislation or something you can kind of hold up, so it's not just you saying it's a union policy. And I think it's, I hope it's also useful. I guess you guys are filmmakers rather than actors, or
we're a whole bunch of stuff, but I guess
I think it's also useful from the point of view of producers. And as I said, I brought it in to try to help low budget producers and welcome them into equity, because I think a lot of them were feeling quite alienated, because it gives you sort of proper stipulations as well. I think there's also a clause. So that was one of the points of contention when I was trying to get this passed, was that what if the film should go on to win loads of awards and make loads of money and the actors have only been paid minimum wage? There's a clause which says that if the film should go on to generate huge amounts of cash, which is probably unlikely, but if it should, the actors have to be paid full equity rates retrospectively. So it kind of allows you to get the thing made, which is often a big stumbling block. And then you can it kind of allows you to pay actors out the back end, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I think I hope it also helps producers as well. I was trying to find a document that would help both actors and producers, because ultimately we work together and it's not an us versus them kind of thing. But that's kind of the framework that the UK are using, and I'm very happy to send it to anyone and talk to anyone who might be interested in hearing about it. We've had it now for, I think, about 3 years, and I do see it being used. I see it on Spotlight, and I think a lot of low budget indie filmmakers actually like being able to use it and to put it on their Spotlight job. So Spotlight is the platform when you're advertising looking for actors in the UK. Yeah. And it gives them a bit of legitimacy, I think, to be able to say that they're using a union agreement. So yeah, I mean, it's been quite popular. It has had take up. It has been used. That was another thing people said to me when I tried to bring it in, that, oh, well, no one will use it. But, I've seen people using it on Spotlight. So
nice. Yeah. I think you covered all my questions I had about equity. That was the next thing I was going to ask you about. Oh, that I do want to know. We've got some very technically minded people here who do enjoy the ways that AI might be implemented into filmmaking. And I know that you have some thoughts and ideas on that, and you've thought about that with your equity work.
Sure. Yes. So we have thought about this quite a lot at Equity, and I was on the Screen Committee, which is like a special working party of people that look particularly at the screen. We have committees for stage and committees for different issues. So I read with quite a lot of interest the SAG deal that they got, because obviously our American counterparts were on strike for quite a while. And it's interesting what they get kind of informs what we're likely to get. So Equity's agreements with our film and TV producers are up for negotiation this year. So I was very interested to kind of see, what the Americans got, because it kind of informs what we're likely to get. And I found that there were still quite a lot of loopholes around the use of AI. So the SAG terms that they won still allow for the use of digital replicas. And it does say that performers will be compensated for the use of their replica. But my kind of worry is that it's sort of been left quite open-ended. It's up to the producers to tell you how much your replica is being used and what that work is ultimately worth, which sort of strikes me as being open to abuse. It says that also consent has to obviously be given, that the performers cannot, your replica cannot be used without your consent. But I think that ultimately, I think consent is often the condition of work. And I think a lot of, you turn up, particularly essays, turn up and you get handed a contract on the day with a lot of legal terminology. Most essays are not in a position to, let me call my lawyer. How many essays have a lawyer on tap ready to? So, and the reality is that if you don't sign the document, you don't work that day. So I think, we have to be careful with this idea that, consent has been given, because if consent is a condition of work, then how freely is it really being given? There's also issues around royalties have still not been completely resolved. So there's no royalties at all that have been won for the games industry, and games are a huge growing industry, so that needs to be looked at. Also, there are no, so with a platform like Netflix, for instance, there's no transparency with their data. Netflix will not tell you how many people have watched a film, or in how many different countries around the world it has been watched. There's no transparency with that data. So it's very difficult to know if your residuals are fair, because again, it's being left up to them to kind of tell you that these are your residuals. But, until you know that it's been watched by 70 million people in 75 territories, how do you actually know if it is a fair recompense? So, yeah, I'm kind of, equity is still very much fighting on that issue, and we're still, I don't feel it's been fully resolved. It's particularly a worry, I think, for our SA members, because it used to be the case that, if they wanted a big crowd scene or an audience to fill a theatre or something, that would be a lot of work for a lot of people over several days. And if they just do it now with computers, then all those people have lost their jobs. Sorry, the harbinger of doom, but
no, it's an evolving issue, I'm sure. Just briefly, I wanted to know about green and red flags for a project. If you hear about a project, what attracts you to it or not? I know you're something of a working actor in that you take the next job for the most part, but what do you look for that excites you about working on something, and what turns you off the idea?
So, just speaking as an actor, I think I've realized that it's all about the people you work with. I can be the best actor in the world, but if this is not a good team around me, the film will not be good, and I will not come out of it looking well. It doesn't matter if I am the best actor in the world, I will not come out of it looking well unless that team are solid. And equally, I can give quite an ordinary performance, but if Jonathan Zaurin films it, I will look great because he's just that good. So I've now realized it's about the people. So I'm going to be controversial and say the man that I work with, because 90 something % of the time it's a man. So yeah, now I go on, it sounds mad, but I say to myself, do I like that man? Do I trust that man? And this is what it's come to. So like, somebody's been getting in touch with me recently, a director that I worked with, and he emailed me and said, I'd like to bring you back. I think, I want to work with you and I want to do another project. And he's now sending me various scripts that I'm looking at. But the main question in my head was, do I like that man? Do I trust him? Is he going to do a good job with this? Is he going to put it together well? Is the communication good? Is he just, does he seem like a solid, responsible sort of person? Because like there's other guys that approached me, like somebody approached me at Romford with a potential idea, and I didn't even look at the script. I looked at him, and he seemed to me to be on drugs. I can tell. So I looked at him and I went, no, already, I haven't read it. I haven't looked at it. I don't want to hear the premise. I don't like that guy. I'm not going to get along with him. We're not going to work well together. So it's all about the people.
Well, if you don't mind, you've inspired my last question, follow-up question. I've certainly in previous projects, I just started this club with no expertise, and I would hang around with people who knew more about me, about cameras, but they made me feel bad. But I felt I had to work with them because they had expertise I didn't. And I certainly know a lot of people who are starting out, who are taking any kind of a project because they want to be doing anything. What would your advice be to those kind of people who need to reconcile like an understanding of their own self-worth with an attempt to build their career?
Yeah, I mean, for the first maybe 2 or 3 years of my career, I probably would have taken nearly anything that I was offered as well. But I've realized that that doesn't serve you and it doesn't work. That guy that's on drugs is not going to make anything that's going to make me look good. And, it's not going to, he probably will never make the film because something will happen. And, this time next year, he'll be talking about how, oh yeah, I tried and then this thing happened and it'll never come to anything. So I think what you said was correct. It's about hanging out with people that do know what they're doing and sort of slowly building to work with better people. It takes time because obviously, great people aren't going to answer the phone to me. Unless you almost need to have something to offer yourself before they want to work with you. So it's like a sort of catch-22. But yeah, when I do, very occasionally you meet someone, like when I met Jonathan and I realized he had such talent, I now follow him around like a ghost. Because, you see who's going to make good work and you stick with them. I have a few things that I learned at Romford that I could share with you if you want to know my tips.
Go for it, please.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I should say that these are partly Spencer Hawkins' tips rather than mine, because I kind of got it through him. He's the festival director. Cool. And these are his tips. So Spencer says, your film freeway profile is your kind of shop window. So be careful with, it's your calling card. So this is how he thinks you should organize your film freeway page. Don't put laurels on the movie poster as it gets in the way. Avoid putting behind the scenes photos on Film Freeway as they do not help on that site. Mark up your budget on the page. This is important as it can open doors, especially when something looks more expensive than it actually was. Unfortunately, the sad reality is that people are more likely to take you seriously if they think it's been made for loads of money. And everybody is lying about the budget. So
that's good to know.
A downloadable trailer is handy, as it allows festivals to download your trailer to then promote the movie on social media and use some clips from it. Fill out the credits as much as possible. If a person in your film is up for any type of award, it will allow judges to find out who they are, what they've done, and that will help your film. Sell the movie in a tight paragraph. Don't go on and on and on for ages. Vimeo is expensive to have, but it's handy in that it shows you which people have watched your movie and in what country they're based. So if, for instance, you've sent your film to an American festival and you look on your Vimeo and see that nobody in America has watched it, then you can and should ask for a refund from that festival. It can also tell you, it tells you how much of the film they've watched and at what point they stopped watching. And that can be interesting, as it might be that everybody stops at the same kind of point, which might then tell you that this scene is a bit weak or this bit of the film is not quite working, and that can also be interesting information. If you have short films, it might be worth teaming up with several other people who also have a short film. You could release it as an anthology feature film, which is one way of attempting to make money out of this notorious business. This is the film festival doctor, Rebecca Louise Smith. So what Rebecca does is she will look at your film for you and tell you, she has a lot of experience basically of film festivals, and she can tell you what's wrong with it or what's right with it, or which kind of festivals you ought to be approaching with your film where it's likely to do well, and just point out, you know, if you need to cut this scene or re-edit that bit. And her service costs £650, so it's not cheap, but I think it's better to spend the money on her and get the film into a good saleable kind of state rather than spending, because you could easily spend £650 sending it around festivals that all reject it, and then you've lost the money anyway. So that's my top tip is Rebecca. You can also ask Spencer himself. Also does consultancy work and has done it for Netflix, so he's also quite good at sort of looking at your film and telling you what's wrong with it, what's right with it, what could be changed. I guess you guys all kind of already know about aggregators and that sort of thing.
Yeah, we use those. Yeah,
you do. So in terms of what you can do with your film, because it's one thing sort of getting the thing made, and then the next question is always kind of, well, now what do I do with it? And it's quite difficult to make a return on indie film, as I'm sure you know. So Google kind of doesn't really want to license a single film anymore. It's not worth it for them for the amount of money. So what you can do is you can approach an aggregator such as Bitmax or FilmHub. Bitmax will ask you for £3,000 up front, but then after that you keep 100% of the profit. FilmHub has no upfront fees, but they take a percentage. So either way you're paying, but it's, do you want to pay at the start or do you want to pay during? The other potential avenue is to put it on Amazon. However, the going rate for an indie film on Amazon is, say that the film sells for, I don't know, £6 on Amazon, just for the sake of argument. Of that £6, the filmmaker receives 2p per streamed hour. I know! That's the going rate. And you wonder into whose pocket does the other £5.98 go. And that's based on per streamed hour. So if they turn it off after the first hour, then you don't even get the 2p. So it's just that's kind of, if you want to sort of distribute it yourself and try and keep the profits for yourself. The other thing to do is to approach a sales agent and do it that way. And so they will then sell it to a distributor. But one of the issues with that is that you lose a lot of the creative control of the project. And I don't know whether you already know this story, Leo, because you know Jonathan and his sort of, I also appeared in a film called
Wyvern Hill.
Yeah, that's right, Wyvern Hill.
Please tell everyone, yeah.
That was the original title. Jonathan got involved with a sales agent who sold it to a distributor, who then changed the title to Hollow, which Jonathan hated because he thought it was kind of meaningless and a sort of generic horror title, which had nothing to do with the picture. The artwork, the poster was changed. So it did originally have Pat Garrett, who's a lady in her sort of 60s, early 70s. She was in the lead. And it was a very beautiful poster with her in the center. And it was then changed to a much younger woman in her 20s doing a very generic sort of, oh, kind of like a horror pose, which again had nothing to do with anything. And then Jonathan felt that the film did quite badly because it had been mispackaged and missold, and people bought it expecting a sort of woman in her 20s running around being chased or whatever they expected. And then they were sort of confronted with this quite serious film about an older lady with Alzheimer's, and and then it got a lot of bad reviews. So so that's kind of one of the problems. And also in terms of trying to make money out of films, if they give you, say, I don't know, just for the sake of argument, £20,000 for your film, and then they have to make back £20,000 before they start paying you out of the profit. But what you find is they're never in profit. That's why they sort of they play with the numbers to the extent that they will never make more than 20,000 out of it, and that is deliberate because they don't want to pay you. So you'll find that there are these charges that suddenly appear on the contract saying, £600 on promotional campaign, and you look around and think, what promotional campaign? But they've, so this is games that they kind of play financially. So again, all I can say is be careful who you sign up with.
Maybe we can open the floor to questions if anyone's got any questions.
Yeah,
for Ayvianna.
of course. Yeah, if I can be useful in any way at all.
Go for it. Daniel, I'll pass you my mic and talk loud so she can hear you.
Hi.
That's good.
Yes, I'm Daniel.
Hi.
Has your role as equity ambassador ever had conflict with you as an actor or on set?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think I can tell a lot about the producer by how they feel about having me on the set. So if they kind of don't want me on, that's a bad sign because it means that they're cutting corners and they're doing a lot of stuff that they don't want the union to see. But to be honest, if those kind of producers don't want me, I kind of don't mind because I don't really want to be on set with those kind of people anyway. And I find that actually there's another group of people that are quite pleased to have me on board because it gives them a bit of legitimacy to be able to say that, yeah, we had a proper union person here, and and the union's on side and everything's above board. So yeah, we have quite a good in terms of the numbers of actors that are members of the union in the UK. It's quite good. It's something like certainly in theatre, it's about 75% membership, and it's I think maybe 60% in TV and film. So the majority of people working are union members, so it's not unusual. And there's still a kind of tradition, I think, of joining the union. Most people do,
I think it's a good thing to also to have in mind and know, it's a safe person, and it's good to know who those safe people are.
Oh God.
You can say it like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Thank you.
Cheer for your questions, Daniel.
Yes, that was my question.
Nice.
Thank you so much.
Would anyone else like to step up? Tom? Go for
Hi.
it. Here comes Tom. Cheers now.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. It's a really strange way to ask a question.
I know.
I'm too tall as well. I've got to come down.
No, I'm very tall. I'm the same.
Good. So you mentioned something a bit earlier in the handbook about kind of what was dealing with awkward things on set, nudity and things that might cross people's boundaries. So
Yeah.
for kind of 99% of the projects I've either either they've been my projects or they've been projects I've worked on together with Leo. It's never been an issue because we've never asked anyone to do any nudity or anything that would be kind of classically triggering. But there was one project where a character that I'd written was like he was like a little bit racist, a little bit homophobic, very sleazy, and he was almost like a Papa Lazarou character, where we wanted him to kind of trigger on every possible level. And the way I dealt with that with the actors was just to tell them everything that I was going to do or everything that I wanted to do, like before, if possible, like a few days before the filming. But that was just like my way of doing it. I just kind of like made that up myself, and I thought if I just tell them 100% everything that I'm going to do and why I'm going to do it, then it's okay. And kind of get feedback from them about what I was planning to do, and that included Leo as well. Like some of the ideas I had about being super homophobic towards him on film, like what he thought about it. Do you have anything you could say about that to just expand on it a little bit? Just kind of what you should do with actors to make them feel comfortable and yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, so I would say well done, because it sounds like you absolutely did all the right things. I think that we sometimes overcomplicate the kind of, Equity now has sort of intimacy coordinators and people that are trained in how to do sex scenes. And I think we're almost sometimes overcomplicating the whole thing. And really, it's mostly just about having a bit of common sense and a bit of sort of human decency, which it sounds like you had. So you're right in that there should be no surprises. So everything should be talked about before, and then actors have a chance to say if they're okay with it, or if for whatever reason they say, actually, I'd rather you didn't do X, Y, Z, or whatever, and would it be okay to do Z instead? So yeah, it's just a matter of having a conversation beforehand and making sure that people feel they can speak, and no one's being sort of forced into things. I think the worst experiences I've had have been, when things were kind of thrown in, like on the day the director suddenly decided that it would be better to be nude, and you've had not really had a chance to sort of think about it. So that kind of thing, I would say, I would discourage. I think, and I mean, when everyone is kind of being above board and genuinely wants to make a film, it's usually fine, 90% of the time. I think the issues that I've encountered have been when men have been using the pretense of making a film in order to actually try and get something else out of me. So I've been, I remember going around to somebody's apartment to audition, and then it turned out that, and having to sort of try and escape through the door and run away, and as a whole. Or I had an experience maybe a year ago where I said I would do this film, which had a lot of sex and nudity, but I said it's fine. I mean, I'm comfortable. But then the director started sending me strange DMs through Instagram. So he started liking all my pictures on my Instagram, and then he sent a message saying, I hope you don't mind all the Instagram love I've been sending you. And I said, no, that's fine. And then he said, why, do you want some more? And there's something about the tone of the communication which is not quite right. And then the following day he said, I want to talk about your character's costume. And I said, all right. And he then sent me a series of images of T-shirts. And on each T-shirt was an image of a different sexual position. And he said, which one of these T-shirts do you think your character would wear? And I thought, mate, come on, you're using this to try to open a different conversation. So I think as long as you're not kind of doing that sort of thing, then, you're fine, as long as you're being respectful. And and
Yeah, I
asking
mean,
the actors.
just to put into context, what I was asking for was like I wanted to show that my character was sleazy by hugging somebody a little bit too long.
But you just
Which
tell
is
the
kind of on a
actress.
different level to what it sounds like you experienced. Yeah.
No, it's okay. But yeah, no, it sounds like you're doing all the right things. I mean, equity guidance would say that you should have an intimacy coordinator on set for every, for any kind of scene that involves contact. I don't know, just speaking for myself, whether that's always necessary or whether it's something. I think if you have sensible people and you have an open conversation, that probably resolves most of the issues.
Yeah. I mean,
Good
I think
practice to hire.
for stuff at that level, I think I don't think it would ever be a problem because I would avoid filming a sex scene because it would make me feel really awkward, like to be in the same room when that was happening. But yeah, no, it's good to get the insight of somebody with a lot of experience. Yeah. Anyone else? Questions?
Thank you.
No. Back to you, Leo.
Okay, fantastic. Then I guess, Ayvianna, we'll just thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate this.
Thank you. Thank you. Lovely to meet you all. Good luck with your films.